Welcome, everybody. I can't believe this is episode number 56. That's crazy. It's ridiculous how many of these we've done, but it's awesome. Okay, that we're doing all this stuff. A few quick housekeeping things before we get into tonight's session. First housekeeping note. This Wednesday night, Binny's is having a craft whiskey festival. Tickets are $40. All the proceeds go to the Step Up Foundation. This is Binny's Lincoln Park. It is a craft spirits, not just whiskey. And it is an amazing event. There are cocktails, gins, coffee liqueurs, rums, you name it. It is a really, really good event. I had a great time at it last year, and I encourage all of you to attend. So that's $40 this Wednesday night at Binny's in Lincoln Park. Second piece of housekeeping. You may have seen an email or some posts that our Cedar Ridge barrel pick has hit the shelves at Binny's. We're doing it a little bit differently this time. Right now, it's on the shelves. Anybody can buy it. It's an ex Merlot cask. It was 4 years in ex bourbon, 2 years ex Merlot, and it is on the shelves at Binny's for $69.99. But right now in the Naperville, Lincoln Park, and Lakeview stores, if you go to the customer service desk and say that you are one of the hobbyist group, you get 15% off. So it is a ridiculous deal. It is, so essentially you're getting a cask strength 6-year-old single malt for $60. Okay. And one other thing that's cool about it, in addition to the fact that it's delicious, is that remember, Cedar Ridge started off as a vineyard, so this is actually using their own Merlot cask. Okay, so it's really cool that it's aged in their own Merlot cask. So that's actually another interesting aspect to this. So please support that as much as you can. We would greatly appreciate it. So now that we've all said that, let's get into tonight's session. So one thing that Eric and I love to do is to introduce people to whiskeys that they may not have known before our sessions. And tonight's whiskey definitely hits that category. It hit the shelves only a few years ago. Monique Houston was the first person who poured it for me. The name of it is called The Lakes, and we have with us tonight Marcus Reidy. Marcus, if you could please introduce yourself, tell us your role with the company, and where you're calling in from right now.
Well, thank you, Gil. Yeah, my name is Marcus. I am the U.S. Brand Development Manager for the Lakes. Calling in from lovely Chicago, the North Side, Rogers Park. Yeah, is that the long and short of it? I
Yeah,
can
I guess
provide
so. I
more
mean,
more
eh, so,
details.
so you are the North American brand ambassador for the whole
I
country?
am, yeah, yes, for the United States, correct. Yeah, I am the only employee in the U.S. We are a very small sales team. I think total, we've probably got six total people on the sales team. I'm in the U.S. We have somebody who does global travel retail for us and covers some of the Asian markets. And then the other four are primarily based in the UK, with most of them based in London.
Okay, and how long have you been with them?
God, we're going almost to a year now. It'll be a year in January.
Cool. And what was your background before this? So before you
Yeah,
started with the Lakes, how
definitely.
did you end up in such a position?
For sure. Well, I've been in the bar industry in the city for well, I'm almost 39, and it'll be 18 years. I'll be in the bar industry, just under 18 years. And I've done every job in the industry, from coat check to management to head bartender to busboy. I've done it all. I've worked in all sorts of different environments, from whiskey bar to cocktail bars to neighborhood bars to music venues, fine dining. Done it all. And then probably about 8 years ago, I got sick of the late nights and took the leap to first I was working for Ballast Point Brewery, and then I started to work for a regional cider company, which was really tons of fun. And spirits has always been my passion. So then after that, I worked for a brand called Tattersall,
Mm-hmm.
which has some whiskeys in market, as well
Mm-hmm.
as a lot of liqueurs and cordials, which played into my background in the cocktail world. And yeah, I was contacted by a recruiter essentially, and they asked if I was interested in representing single malt from the UK, and I said I've never heard of that. Or from at least from England, they said, and I said I never heard of that. And yeah, the rest is history. There's a little fun fact. When I was actually at Binny's World of Whiskey in 2023, so 2 years ago, I had this I was with Tattersall. I had this tiny little barrel, and I had I think we did an American single malt, a rye whiskey, and a bottled in bond bourbon. Had those on my barrel, and just next to me was this single malt brand. And it was right after they had won World's Best Single Malt. And so everybody was coming up to this table and putting their empty glasses on my barrel. And I'm just like, what the hell is going on here? Finally, I ended up talking to this woman. Her name is Kirsty, and she represented the lakes. And we chatted for a little bit. And flash forward maybe 6 months later, I'm on a Zoom call. I'm like, man, this woman looks so familiar to me. And then finally, I sent her an email and was like, I think we sat next to each other at Binny's World of Whiskey. And she sent me the most British response I've ever heard. She said, "Blimey, you have a bloody good memory, mate." And
Love it.
yeah,
I
that was
actually
kind of
think that I think that I actually met her because Monique has an annual like industry whiskey dinner, and I've been to it, and I think that she was there presenting the lakes
I think so.
one
Longman
of the
and Eagle,
years.
maybe.
Yes, at Longman
Yeah,
Eagle.
yeah, that was definitely her. Yep.
Okay, wonderful. So I got to tell you, I'm getting the aromas already of these things, and we will start talking about the whiskey. But everybody knows that we don't stand on ceremony here. So before we even start talking about the whiskey, I'm just going to say cheers to everybody. We're
Cheers.
starting off with the Rivea, right? Is that how it is?
Correct, Revea. Yeah.
Rivea. Okay, so the Rivea, then number five, then number six. So cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Oh, that's lovely. So,
Mm,
English single malt. Obviously,
yeah.
it's not Scotch, but I've looked you up on the map, and it looks like you're only half an hour from Scotland. I
Yeah.
mean, you are really close to Scotland. It says that there are alpacas walking around where you are, and then you guys also make gin. So, can you tell me first off, okay? We know the definitions of Scotch. Is there an actual definition, a standard for what you would consider English single malt to be?
It is in the works to actually have it codified. But what we are working towards is essentially the same thing as Scotch. However, the main designation, and unfortunately, none of it really applies to anything we're tasting, but the main designation that we're reaching for is English single malt, is Scotch has to be aged in oak. We're trying to make English single malt aged in wood. So we're hoping, and it really is reflective of the kind of intention of the brand. We're hoping that the aging of wood will open up new doors for English single malt that Scotch might not be able to reach. So it still pays homage to its tradition,
Uh-huh.
particularly where we are so far north to the Scottish tradition. But we're hoping within a few years, once this gets codified and once we have some of these cool experiments we're working with, English single malts will start leading in a
Okay.
category of
So,
wood.
okay, so if it was okay, so if you would not be using oak, which let's
Mhm.
face it, most of it comes from the U.S. bourbon industry, okay,
Correct.
um, what would you be using if you're not using oak?
Well, I will say oak will probably always still be there, particularly for us. It's always going to be a lot of sherry seasoned oak. Um, However, some of the experiments, I was just in the UK in July. There was chestnut that our head whiskey maker was experimenting with,
Oh, wow.
acai, a couple other ones that kind of
Okay.
escape me. But it's really so our whiskey maker. We'll talk more about her. Her name is Sarah Burgess. Many years as the master blender at McKellen. She's very excited because she has these close relationships with the bodegas in Spain, and they're excited because they're finally able to use things that aren't just oak. So it's kind of
Ah,
becoming a
nice.
really new fun thing where all parts of the business are really getting excited about something different.
Oh, that's
Um,
great. Now,
yeah,
is there with English single malt, is there an age requirement? Is it
it
like
has
a
to be a
3 year thing? 3 year thing?
correct 3 years. Yep.
Okay,
Mhm.
3 years. Okay. And let's get some of the geek stuff out of the way here. Your barley. Where are you getting your barley from?
It's British barley. It's coming from the region. Sometimes it will be sourced north into in Scotland. Sometimes it's in England. It's really dependent on where the purveyor we source from is actually grabbing it from. So it's very similar to those lowland areas of where they're getting the barley. It's we're not
Okay.
necessarily sourcing it from an individual farm or source. It's coming from the purveyors that provide it to all the other Scotch
Okay.
industries. Yeah.
And are you malting your own, or are you using another malting company, or
Uh,
how does that happen?
it comes malted. We are not malting on
Okay.
site. Yeah,
Okay. And I've already tasted all these things. There's I don't really I'm not getting any peat or anything like that. I'm not getting
correct.
any smoke right now, right?
It is a smokeless malt.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
for
So that's all the
everything we've
basic
done.
stuff. Okay.
Yeah, we have yet to release a peated single malt.
Okay. And your water so the same barley and the same malt is really going into all of your expressions at this point, right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. All right. And your water source, is it a local water source?
It is the River Derwent, which actually is stands for the River Oak, a river of oaks.
Oh.
Coincidentally enough, it is directly behind our distillery. It is one of the longer rivers in the Lake District, which is where we're based in the Lake District of the
Mhm.
UK. Yeah, long, kind of very rapid for the area, a very rapid river, but we pull directly from there. Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Um, and just a few other things before we talk specifics about these whiskeys. Um, so since you're a relatively new distillery, okay, are you experimenting with like different size barrels, or are you just trying to do everything in the same size barrel? How's that
Yeah.
experimentation working?
So,
Especially since you're dealing with working with somebody who used to be at Macallan, okay,
yeah,
because
right.
that clearly is going to be affecting what you're doing.
Correct. So barrel specifics is really our bread and butter. We source all of our barrels from, not all of them, the majority of our barrels are coming from Spain, where
Okay.
the coopers are receiving the oak, primarily American, French, and Spanish, um, uncured. So it cures out in the sun, uncoopered. So it cures out in long slats for about 6 to 8 months. Um, and then they turn that into the oak barrels. However, a good 60 to 70% of those slats are discarded for imperfections. So the other 30% are what are turned into the barrels. The 60 to 70% that is discarded is actually the fuel that is used to cooper the barrels. So it's not a
Oh,
natural gas
nice,
fuel, it's a
nice.
wood burn fuel. Those barrels then go to different bodegas throughout Spain, and they receive sherry, anywhere from Fino to Oloroso, Pedro Jimenez, in between, Amontillado, Palo Cortado, Cream, all the spectrum of the sherries. We receive those barrels within 1 to 5 days. We are putting our single malts into them, so they're still
Wow.
wet. Yeah,
Oh,
um,
that's neat. So then you're
yeah.
actually so the logistics of that process. Okay, that's fascinating because when you're distilling, you need to know that you have the barrels to put the stuff into, and obviously you're trying to keep track of what was in those barrels before. So that I can just my mind is just seeing gigantic spreadsheets. You
Yeah,
know,
no,
you know.
I mean, I can't wrap my mind around it. Yeah, there's some smart people who are handling those logistics. Yeah, definitely.
Right.
Um,
And
and
are they all barcoded? Because I know that a lot of distilleries now are using barcodes to identify the barrels.
yes, as of I think this past year, everything now has some sort of electronic signature attached to it.
Okay.
I should also add we do a lot of red wine barrique barrels too.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure where the red wine is being sourced from. I'm fairly certain it's in Europe. And then we also have some port and some ex bourbon barrels too.
Okay. Great. Um, and then one last thing, and then we will get into the specific series of these. So I noticed that all three of these, they currently do not have an age statement on them. Okay.
Yes.
So when we talk about them, I want us to talk about that. But let's get into the Revea because
Yeah,
we're
let's do
getting
it.
a lot of comments here. People are talking about how fruity it is, how light and fruity, but you still get like a good aroma and the flavor's lasting. So tell us about this. How old is it? Okay. Is this a blend of different barrels? All right. And what were those barrels?
Yeah.
What actually led to this? Because this is a lovely whiskey.
So I like to start with Revea in the range of what we're tasting. Is Revea's the lowest in proof out of the other of all three, and it's also a lot lighter in style. Um, it's part of a series we call the Whiskey Maker Edition series. So we have the Edition series, and then the other two we're going to taste are part of the Reserve series. The Edition series is essentially one-offs we do for individual markets. Sometimes they're distillery only releases. They're really reflective of the process we call élevage, which is taken from the luxury cognac industry. It's essentially the movement of liquid from barrel to barrel to barrel to develop flavors. And we'll talk a little bit more about it when we get into
It,
the Reserve series.
is that similar to the Solera process that we've seen in other
It's a
distilleries?
little different. Solera
Okay.
is a little more passive. Solera being you have your youngest whiskey in the most abundance on top, and your oldest whiskey in the least abundance on the bottom, and it kind of trickles down. Uh, Elevage is very active and very intentional. We employ more people on our in our warehouse staff on the actual barrel floor essentially than we do anywhere else in the distillery, and it's mainly because we're constantly taking barrels and blending them into new barrels and blending single malts that have been in two different barrels, blending them together into a new barrel. And it's really active and it's really being driven and directed by our whiskey makers to develop new flavors. So
Okay.
each kind of portion of the single malts we have kind of got their own individual journeys to develop these flavors. So when we have these flavors develop, real quick, Gil, because I think this will explain Reveille a little
Okay.
more. When
Great.
we have these flavors develop, our whiskey maker, Sarah Burgess, will have an inspiration. In this case, the inspiration for Reveille, I'm going to hold this up to see if it will come into
Um,
focus.
hold on a second. Pull it back. Hold on. Wait.
And I can turn off my
No,
blur
we're
too.
not.
Um,
It's
I'll turn
not
off my
showing up.
blur real quick, but
All right.
give me 1 second after that. But anyways, Reveille is inspired by the Mediterranean. So when it comes time to blend together the final product,
Uh-huh.
Sarah will pull from individual barrels that she thinks is most reflective of the inspiration, the
Okay.
Mediterranean. There we go. Thank
Okay.
you, Eric.
All right.
Um,
So the
Yeah,
question then, okay, so
here's
hold on,
the
what's Eric showing? Okay,
label.
Eric's showing
This
the
is the label
Revea.
from the
Okay.
Revea.
Right. Oh
yes.
yeah, that's beautiful, right? So you see the Mediterranean, right? It's beautiful. Um, so then here's the question I have for you then. And it's a question that at least one or two people have also asked here. How do you duplicate that? Because one thing for educating the consumer, the consumer has an expectation. They want to know that if they've had X and they go back and they buy another bottle of X, it's going to be similar. Um, are things like Revea and you said the Iris, and then we also know the Equinox, are those one-off expressions?
Everything we've done at the distillery so far have all been one-off expressions. We
And
have
that's
yet to
because you're so
release
young. So it's because you're young, probably?
that, and this élevage process has taken some time to really get the formula
Wow.
down. However, you tasted 7 when you were in Israel. That is
Right.
the end of the Whiskey Maker Reserve series, numbered 1 through 7.
Okay.
We'll taste 5 and 6. After 7, we will, and it'll release in February in the UK, be releasing our first core product. So the series 1 through 7 is this exploration of élevage, and we've after 7 different tries, we've finally able to come up with
Okay.
that journey in order
Good.
to release a core
Okay.
product.
Because I was thinking about how tough your job is, because to a certain
Yes.
extent, if you have a whiskey, first of all, that people don't know, and each expression is different from the
Mm-hmm.
last, that's not only tough for the consumer, but it's also tough for the retailer, to
Yeah.
sell it. So I'm glad you said that. But with respect to these expressions, so the Revea, how old are the whiskeys that go into this élevage process?
So we've only been making single malts for about 7, 8, maybe coming up to 9 years. So the average is about 7 to 8 years of spirit.
Okay,
We find though that this élevage process, this very active direction that we can have with our barrels, produces single malts that drink a little older than this 7 to 8 year average. And that's really, we like to refer to ourselves as a designed led whiskey, and it's really the design of how we're making these flavors by moving it between barrels, and then how we're assembling the flavors from different barrels as well.
got it. And okay, so the ABV on this is 46.7,
Yes.
and this is currently it's not on the shelves, right? It's gone. Is that correct? This
No,
one,
it's
or is
still
it still?
available.
It's
No,
still
it's still
available?
available. Yeah,
Well,
there's
like
one.
$80 or so?
Yeah, Benny's actually has it for 89.99 on sale. It's typically 100, but they have it on
Okay,
sale right now. But this is exclusive to the United States.
okay,
So this is the whiskey maker editions we did specifically for this market, and you can't find it in other markets.
okay. So the Equinox that I had in Israel, that's not available here.
No, I believe that was a distillery only release, celebrating, well, the equinox, the transition from spring into fall,
Oh, okay.
or
Yeah,
summer
because
into
that was
fall.
at
Pardon me.
a because I was at my daughter brought me to a whiskey bar in Tel Aviv that I had never been to, which was almost like Delilah's in Tel Aviv. It was crazy. I mean, really, it's like it had a beat up pool table, it had a beat up ping pong table, it had no TVs, it had loud rock music, and a kick-ass whiskey selection, including a lot of
Yeah,
single barrels. I really felt like I was at home, and the owner and I are now buddies. I mean,
love
it's
it.
an amazing place, and I looked there and I was like, hey, they have the lakes. We're interviewing the lakes in a few weeks. I'm gonna have whatever the lakes they have, and I ordered both of them, for me and my friends, and we enjoyed them. It
Yeah.
was wonderful. Yeah, it's great. One other thing about that bar, just got to mention, is that it was one other weird thing is that the owner of the bar is the same age as Mike Miller. Okay, it was
Jeez.
just
Yeah.
weird. He was like 1 year younger than I am. It's like this is a little too weird,
Yeah.
but it was awesome.
Right.
Okay, so I'm really enjoying this. I think this is a lovely whiskey. Very easy going down. Really, this is a lovely, lovely whiskey. I'm really enjoying it. Um, yeah, it's refreshing, you
Yeah,
know.
exactly. We wanted to create this really light, kind of refreshing. When I describe the difference between the series to people, I often say Revea is the one I want to sit out in the backyard with I'll throw in the English slang, with my mates, um, and kind of have barbecue and just enjoy company. Whereas the Whiskey Maker Reserve, the bigger and bolder ones, are more I sit on my nice chair and contemplate, the ills of the world, or whatnot. So
Got
yes,
it.
definitely, they definitely differ from one another. Revea is a lot of American oak, and a lot of Oloroso seasoning. However, it'll touch a bunch of other sherry seasoned oak. There's some ex bourbon barrels in there as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, that really that process just sounds fascinating to me. Um, okay, so the next two expressions, just everybody should know and be prepared for. We are stepping up a little bit in ABVs. Okay, everybody should know that. The next one we're doing is number five. Okay, and number five is 52%. So it's 52%, correct? And actually, isn't number six also
correct.
52?
Yeah, so we're the élevage process, or pardon me. There's the élevage process, and then there's also the process we call the assemblage, which is the actual designing of the final product. So Revea is an example of this assemblage process of the Mediterranean. When we do the assemblage process, we are not just trying to find specific flavors, but we're looking for aroma, we're looking for texture, we're looking for mouthfeel, all of that. But we're also looking for proof. We're not proofing for volume, we're proofing for flavor. So we have wildly different proofs throughout our entire selection. However, we'll never jump below this 46% because we'll never chill filter anything. So everything's naturally colored and everything is non-chill filter.
Okay. Well, speaking of color, it is very obvious that the number five has been
Yes.
aged in a different way than the Rivea because, the Rivea, which is in my left hand here, it's very almost clear, and Then you have the number five. I mean, this is, I mean, that speaks to a wine aged, heavily wine aged. Now, so please tell us, what casks were
For
used for
sure.
aging the number five, because the color in this is incredible. By the way, it's also delicious.
Thank you. So what I've been told is that American oak is a tighter grained oak, so it imparts less color onto the single malt. Whereas French and Spanish oak, your European oaks, are a wider grain and it imparts more color onto the single malt. So number five and number six are an expression of a lot of European oak. That's part of why we're getting the color, but there is a lot of Pedro Jimenez and Oloroso seasoning on the French and Spanish oak. Five and six have a very similar color to one another, whereas Rivea has a lot of this American oak is going to be this lighter style color.
Okay.
So five specifically, a lot of Spanish oak, a lot of Pedro Jimenez seasoning.
So it's a lot of PX. So
Yes,
there's a heavy PX. Okay. And
correct.
the
Yeah.
and is the average age on this again also like 7 years or so?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. So it's about 7 years, and you're using the same elevage process again, right?
Yeah, so five and six are part of the Whiskey Maker Reserve series. Started obviously at one, finished at seven, which you had the fortunate chance of tasting. Each expression in the series, the analogy I like to use is if they're like siblings. They all share a similar DNA. Sherry seasoned oak, developed through the process of elevage. However, this elevage process differs from each expression. And like siblings, as you've grown older and you've kind of gone on your own individual journeys, you've developed your own personalities. So each expression similar to one another, however, through this elevage and then finally assemblage process, they've developed their own unique flavors. So five is going to have elements of four, three, two, and one,
Right.
but it also has its own uniqueness. Primarily a lot of Spanish oak, Pedro Jimenez.
Got it. So when you move on from these experimental series to your core,
Mm-hmm.
okay? I mean, I love what you're doing. You're experimenting to decide what you want to end up ultimately producing, okay? Um, when I look at something like this, okay, 52%, and then the Rivea's, 46.7, is your core going to be in the same areas as those?
Yeah, actually, I tried it in July in the UK, and it sits at 48%. I
Okay.
believe it's 48%. Could be 47, but it's right there.
And will the
Um,
core be, and so so obviously you've had, one, two, three, four, five, six, seven. Okay. I, are any of those like considered to be a favorite that you're just going to try to make into your core? Is that what's going on here?
that's a great question. I think it's actually a lot more intentional than that. I think it's kind of interesting. So, 4 won World's Best Single Malt in 2022 at the World Whiskey Awards. If you look at that category of who we were up against, 30-year-old scotches, beautiful Japanese whiskeys, we took that award home. It was a very big deal for us. Um, you can still find occasional bottles of four out in the world. Some binnies still have it. It's been sold out in the UK forever. It routinely goes on auction there from anywhere from 500 to 3,000 pounds. The question is always then, well, why don't you just make four forever? Well, that journey is unique to four. We were not able to have enough barrels laid. We didn't have the
Mm,
process down enough to create four forever. However, we have so Sarah is our current whiskey maker, Sarah Burgess. Prior to that, we had a man named Dhaval Gandhi, who also spent many years as a blender with McKellen. Sarah was actually his boss. Dhaval left us about 3 years ago. The number five is Dhaval's whiskey. Number six is Dhaval's whiskey. Honestly, Rivea is Dhaval's whiskey. Signature, which will be the first core product, is Sarah's first whiskey she's actually made with us.
aha.
So it's more reflective than of Sarah's process of
Okay.
elevage. And it
Okay.
just so happens that we have enough barrels laid now that Sarah's process of elevage can be the elevage process that is repeated over and over and over again.
Okay. So it
Yeah.
sounds like you are not planning to actually release age statement whiskeys then.
We will never, from what I've been told, we will never release an age statement whiskey. This elevage process
Okay.
we find is how we want our whiskey to be made, and it
Mhm.
gives us the opportunity to be really creative with the flavors that we can develop from simply primarily sherry seasoned oak barrels.
Well, I got to tell you, this is, I mean, it's delicious. I mean, and you're right. It tastes like a, like a really nice PX aged Scotch,
Yeah.
is what this is. It's delicious. And whereas the Rivea, it's more of like a summery drink, a summery on the, on the veranda, overlooking the Mediterranean and all that stuff. This is more of a like a fireplace, whiskey
Yes.
to me, fireside. Um, but it's lovely. And then when we go on to the next one, okay, to the number six, it's an even darker color than the five. So can you talk to why the five is a lighter color than the six? Why is six such a heavier color?
I mean, I don't know the specifics of it, but I can tell you it's more French oak, more Oloroso, and probably the darker color is going to come. There's a lot more red wine barrique barrels blended into this one. So
Okay.
it has not just through color, but also it has a little more mouthfeel and acidity, not translating citrusy, but tannic acidity. Um,
Oh yeah.
it's weightier. You feel it on the sides of your palate
It's
more.
it's
It's
uh
chewy,
chewier. It's chewier.
chewy.
Right.
Yeah.
It's chewier. Right. I'm feeling it like in the salivary glands in my cheeks.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, Yeah, it's like you keep wanting to go for more. It's like another potato chip. It's like now that I've had
Yes.
some, I immediately want to put more in. I mean, this is good. This
Yeah,
is really good.
six is a beautiful expression of the élevage process. It's tapping into not just big, rich flavors, but also texture as well. And five has beautiful texture too, but six really we start to develop a texture that I think is reminiscent of an older single malt, like a Macallan 15 or something like that.
Are some of the whiskeys in six older than the ones in five?
I actually don't know the answer to that.
Interesting. Okay.
Nothing is really going to be older than 8 or 9 years because we just were not making single malts at that time. So nothing is. There's never going to be until we reach maturity of 15 years. We don't have the option to blend a 15-year into our single malts because we just don't have that laid. So it's an expression of that 7 to 8 year average that we do.
Got it. Where are you available around the world right now? And what markets are you currently available?
We are in, God, we're probably in five of the seven continents. No Antarctica yet. I don't think we're in South America. We are in Central America and the Caribbean. But our main market is London. But we're in Asia, Taiwan, China, Japan, Australia, throughout the European countries, into Ukraine, obviously Israel, into Africa. So we are a global brand. Our internally, the kind of motivating spirit of what we do is we want to become 1% of the global luxury dark spirits market. So that is a hefty goal. It's a lot of whiskey to sell, considering you're up against all the luxury cognacs, all the luxury scotches, all the luxury single malts. Our goal is to become by 2030 1% of the global dark spirits luxury
Okay, so
market.
let's talk capacity and ramping up and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So how many barrels per year are you currently producing?
Um, that I don't know. I can tell you we have about 7,000 barrels laid currently.
Okay,
Um, yes.
okay. And I assume that that's more than you had 3 years ago.
Correct. Yes, correct. It's
Okay,
continuing, but we do a lot of second and third fill barrels too. That's part of the élevage process.
right. Okay. And obviously there are things that are beyond your control. Okay.
Mhm.
We now have a new president who's coming into this country, and one of the big things that we're talking about here in the States is how his talk of tariffs could be affecting the domestic whiskey industry. Okay. Um, Obviously, I'm sure people overseas are having those same conversations right now. Okay, can you tell us a little bit about the discussions that y'all are having about these tariffs?
I actually can't. I'm not because there's anything proprietary about it. I have a phone call with my boss tomorrow, and that is one thing that is on my list about 2025 planning. So the hope is to get number seven here in the U.S. very quickly, even not having nothing to do with tariffs. However, the I don't know if it can even be quicker as a result, but yeah, I mean it's tough. I'll be honest. It is a tough thing. I think the U.S. market is is paramount for this 1% of the global luxury dark spirits market. Obviously, the U.S. market for spirits is enormous.
Right.
Um, yeah, I don't know. It's a challenge. It 100%
Okay.
is a challenge on top of a host of other challenges of trying to sell something that isn't Scotch, trying to sell something that isn't bourbon in America is challenging enough. But yeah, no, that's a great question, Gil, and I wish I had a better answer for you. But much like
No way. Well, I
the
mean, it is all new. I mean, obviously it is all new. We don't know what
yeah,
actually is going to happen yet. What I do know is
correct.
that there are a lot. There's obviously, I'm sure you've seen the articles, about people in the United States, MGP reducing capacity, and things like that, and sales are down, and so obviously people are worried about inflation as a result of tariffs. But again, this is all speculation. We don't know yet.
We don't
So
know.
it was a little bit of an unfair question, given that we don't know this situation, but I wanted
Yeah,
to take on it. But since we are talking about prices, so you did mention that the Revea is on the shelves for about 89.99. Numbers 5 and 6, how much are those on the shelves for?
same price. Everything in the U.S. Is all line priced at that $100 mark, occasionally on sale at Binny's for 90. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay,
Mhm.
wonderful. Those are very reasonable prices, but it's interesting, in your role as a brand ambassador, obviously, when I think of the obstacles, okay, so first of all, it's an English single malt, it's not Scotch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. It's a distillery nobody's heard of before, and then
Yep.
there's the faulty perception in the market that age necessarily means quality. Okay.
Yes.
So those are interesting obstacles that you have to address, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's an everyday thing for me. And obviously the liquid is good, so that we have that going for us, and
Right,
which
right.
is key. Um, we found when I first took this job, I don't think my bosses realized the uphill battle to sell something like this. In London, we are about 4% of the global or of the London luxury dark spirits market, which is huge. London is such a big market, and we do so well. And that doesn't quite translate to other markets, and it definitely doesn't translate to the U.S. market. Yeah, I mean it's a challenge. I think what we've found is we're not just building a brand; we're trying to build an entire category of spirits, which I think isn't just English single malts. I prefer to refer to us as a new world whiskey or a world whiskey.
Well,
I
right.
want to be more
World
associated with
whiskeys. Right. Because
correct
we
with
have,
the Indian
there's
whiskeys
right,
and the
because there's
Taiwanese
Welsh,
whiskeys.
right, there's
Right.
Welsh, there are all these different whiskeys from different parts that aren't Scotland. I mean, several of us here, I'm sure we have, I mean, I have you know, I have an American single malt shelf, okay, and then I have two Scotch shelves, but then I have, a shelf that's like Irish and Israeli, and then I have another shelf that's just world single malts, okay, and the
Yeah.
world single malts, that's where I have, Welsh, Israeli, Australian, Indian, all these different things, and it's a great category. I mean,
Yeah.
it's wonderful stuff. I'm loving it. So, what I want to do right now is I want to open it up to questions. Everybody knows the process here. You all have the reactions, the way that you can raise your hand. Okay. So if you have questions, please start raising your hands, and I will first turn it over to Eric. Eric, do you have any questions for Marcus?
One statement and then question. So when we pour the samples out into the and pour the bottles into the sample bottles, we always have a little bit left over, and we split between whoever's whoever comes over to do the distribution. So this last time we ended up doing something a little atypical. We were tasting the three bottles, and Evan and I kind of like both 5 and 6, and we couldn't decide which one we wanted. And then I decided on a whim to actually mix 5 and 6,
Yeah.
and it was actually amazing. So the end result, I got a little snarky on it because I happen to have a leftover gold pen from my son's bar mitzvah. Is I
So
actually
11.
made
Oh, okay, 5.5. Beautiful. I love that.
So if anybody does have any leftover of their 5 and 6, mix them together, and it actually is really amazing because it gives that depth of 5 and then the brightness and the chewiness of 6. So it really does meld quite nicely.
Well,
Yeah.
I love it.
What I'm hearing, Eric, is everybody should go out and buy one bottle of 6 and one bottle of 5. That's what I think everyone should be doing. So
Yes, exactly.
That's a lovely
So
conclusion.
yeah. So one question about the distillery, since you said you have about 7,000 barrels laid down, and you are very much actively moving liquid around between barrel and barrel. What's the layout of the warehouse? And like how high are things being stacked? Because
sure.
you're not just letting them rest for 5 years at a
No.
time.
So yeah, I had the opportunity back in, God, it was when it might have been when I first started with the lake. So back in January, or pardon me, beginning of February, I was in the UK in the Lake District, and got to see the 3 different warehouses that we have our whiskeys aging in. And so our distillery in the Lake District is tiny. We do all of our production there. It's not big enough to hold 7,000 barrels. So we've bought throughout the Lake District various properties to house our barrels. It's big. They are racked in probably maybe 5 to 7 spaces deep, and they're not necessarily temperature controlled. The Lake District gets pretty much, when you think of the shitty English weather, that's the Lake District. It's gloomy, it's cold a lot, it's wet a lot, it rains a lot. So yeah, they sit in these warehouses that are not temperature controlled, and it's hence why we have so many people on our warehouse team. Is a lot of that gets moved around frequently, and it's a pain in the ass to do. We will eventually be purchasing one larger space to house all of our barrels in. But it is a shoestring production right now. And that is not, I don't want that to sound insultive to any of our warehouse people who do a wonderful job at what they do with what they
But
have.
it's tough work. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a tough
It's
job.
hard. Oh my
Yeah.
God. And it's not just that too. There's a lot of waste involved in dumping barrels to put into new barrels, as well. So yeah, it's a really, really hard job.
And does
Does that answer
everybody
your
hold their
question?
breath when they're moving barrels around?
Yeah, probably. Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Wonderful. Great.
Thank
Eric,
you.
do you have any other questions?
No, that's it.
All right, William Myers, please unmute yourself.
Yeah. Hey,
Hey,
so
buddy.
this is really good. I love this stuff.
Thank you.
Couple of questions. So you're talking about the warehouse. Are those dunnage warehouses then? So those dirt floors or concrete floors?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry. I apologize. Yeah.
And you know what? That's not bad. Having
Yeah.
like muggy weather. That's all good. Do you know at what ABV the distillate comes off the still at, and also ABV it gets barreled at?
Somewhere in the mid 60s. Yeah, it's if I can talk real quick about our distillation process.
Yeah, sure.
It's a slow fermentation, about 96 hours. I think we use 2 different types of yeast strains. Copper pot stilled, very typical. However, the thing that does set us apart a little bit is our condensers we have a copper condenser, and then we have a stainless steel condenser as well. And the new make that is coming off of each condenser are fairly unique. Copper condenser is making a new make that's very fruity, very cereal-like. The stainless steel condenser is making a new make that is very earthy and funky and weighted. And so our new make is a mix of those two condensed distillates. But my guess is it's somewhere in the probably the high 60s is what I'm going to say. I don't know the exact proof that it's coming off the still, so I apologize, Bill.
Do they get barreled? Do you mix them or do you keep them separate?
We mix them, so everything is
Okay.
the same new make in the barrels that goes into the barrels.
Okay, that might be fun sometime just to like keep them separate and.
Oh yeah, for sure. To see what that does, definitely.
Yeah,
I've tasted each off the condensers, and they're very different. It's a very cool experiment.
So I know that this would probably never fly past marketing, but personally, I think selling little sample packs where you get like a 375 or 350 of each type of new make at still proof, whatever, I would love that.
That's very cool. We did kind of a similar idea, not necessarily focused on new make, but we did a series called Elements, 375s, all at barrel proof, 7 different expressions, all aged in American oak. However, each American oak was seasoned with a different type of sherry. So Fino, Amontillado, Manzanilla, Palo Cortado, so on and so forth. And you would receive this set, which you can kind of see how each sherry seasoned cask affects new make spirit. It was exclusive to the distillery. If you're ever up there in the Lake District, I think they still have some. It's a really, really cool project we did.
That's awesome.
Love it. That's great.
Super. Thanks.
Bill, any other questions, or are you good?
I was just gonna say one of my favorite tastings I've ever done was a Springbank tasting where we did fully matured 14-year-old Springbanks in different type of sherries, as well as that particular type of sherry. Which for Chicago,
Nice.
if you're ever looking for sherries, I think it was 18 or 17 or 1 year during Whiskey Fest, I went in and hung with Gene at Warehouse for a couple hours and left with like $700 worth of like sherries and other type of secondary wine, finishes and whatnot, which I would say that he probably has a better selection than even Benny's. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Josh Eisenberg, please unmute yourself.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, yeah.
All right, cool. Love this. This is super cool. They're truly unique expressions here. I had a question about 6. So we were talking about the chewiness and the mouthfeel from it and the texture. And so I love your perspective on how much of that is that coming from the French oak? How much of that is coming from the wine? You said these are pretty wet barrels when they're coming out. And what type of wine? Is it Bordeaux? Is it Claret? Like, I don't know. I'm just curious about that, right? Because they all have a different perspective too, depending on what point the wine is at.
I'm fairly certain it's Bordeaux. I knew I wasn't certain where it was coming from, but obviously, if I'm certain it's Bordeaux, it's got to be coming from France, which makes sense somewhere in the somewhere in my brain. I don't know. I mean, this again is this designed process that our whiskey makers are taking. So we have the kind of it's called the blending room in our distillery. And essentially, it's a room that has samples of hundreds of different barrels. And so Sarah and her number 2, a woman named Grace, both of them have just the most amazing palates, will sit across from one another and taste samples, write individual notes, and then compare notes. And then when it comes time to blend something like number 6 together, when they're ready to blend in something that has some tannic structure to it, they're pulling from those samples that they've identified as having tannin. That sample could be the French oak single malts blended with the single malt that's aged in the red wine barrels. So it's very active and very intentional, designed that way. So I apologize. I don't have an exact answer of whether or not the tannin is coming from a red wine barrel or if it's coming from the French oak. It's coming from however they've identified these barrels to have tannin structure. So when it comes time to make the signature, the core product, to have this tannic quality to it, they know that if they put the single malt in French oak for 3 years, pull it out and put it in a red wine barrique barrel for 2 years, they can get the level of tannin that they want, as an example. So I apologize. I don't know the exact answer to what barrels are giving the tannin structure.
No, it's a great answer. I mean, it just helps me understand the process too that you're using to get to the texture, which is really cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. The élevage process is really difficult to translate. We spent in July, I was in the UK, and as a whole entire sales team, along with a bunch of other people from the distillery, we spent 2 days in groups really trying to come up with the best way to describe élevage. And it was wildly different amongst salespeople. So it is tough to translate. And I wish I had a better visual representation of what élevage is. Yeah, great question, though. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Josh. Great. Josh, do you have any other questions, or are you good? Yeah, he's good. All right. Michael Bloom, glad you could join us tonight. Please unmute and ask your question to Marcus.
Great. So first, I usually ask a blending question, but I'm not going to. But I am
Okay.
really, really happy that so many people are playing with the whiskey in front of them because it's fantastic. I wanted to ask a collaboration question. Up front, you talked about the fact that you're looking for English whiskey or English single malt to be its own category. In the U.S., of course, we know who the collective of folks were that kind of put that together, and know that our distillers sometimes work together quite closely, even though they're competitors in the market. Who, if anybody, is the Lakes working with to build a more global recognition of English single malt whiskey? I did some research while we were talking, and I saw that there's about a map of about 55 different distilleries in England. In 2024. And I only know like a handful. Like we know the English Whiskey Company and Bimber and maybe Cotswolds
North
on my
British,
radar.
yeah, North British
Yeah.
we've
And North
had,
British. Yeah, that's a grain distillery, I think.
Right.
But yeah, so who are you working with, if anybody, and what are those collaborations like in England?
So there is an English Whiskey Guild that we are a part of. And yeah, I mean, it's through that guild that this kind of codification of English making whiskey is being filtered. But a lot of the names that you mentioned, and once again, I'll be honest, I am separated a lot from that, being over here in my own little island. But it is a collaboration amongst the English distillers, whiskey distilleries. There is kind of a internal debate amongst us too about whether or not we want to be more similar to Scotch, or how far away from Scotch do we want to be? Do we want to be associated with this new world category, or do we want to be cozying up to the Scotch category as well? And I'll be honest, I don't know the answer to that, and I think it probably varies from market to market. But it's it's a really interesting time. If I can, you mentioned the English Distilling Company. So 2022, we win World's Best Single Malt. 2023, Milk and Honey wins World's Best Single Malt at the World Whiskey Awards. 2024, the English Distilling Company wins World's Best Single Malt. So this new world whiskey kind of category is really starting to make some splashes in the global world whiskey industry, and it's kind of a fun time to be a part of it. So I don't have a lot of direct answers for you, Michael, and I'm sorry. All I can say is that it's in the motion. There's a lot of debate going on of not just how should English whiskey be codified, but what is the future of new world whiskey, and how is English whiskey or Israeli whiskey or Taiwanese whiskey or Indian whiskey leading this kind of charge into the new world whiskey category.
Excellent. No, I'm happy with a watch this space kind of answer.
Yeah,
I think
thank you.
that's just fine.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
you're welcome, Michael. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good question.
So Marcus, one thing that might interest you is that so we pour the whiskeys into these little sample bottles, that you see here. We get them out to people, and I always get an extra one, and I try to get one. And I try to always deliver one to my local Binnies because
Okay.
and I'm Lakeview. Okay, so
Okay,
Lakeview Binnies.
sure. The
And
castle babies.
yeah, yeah, I
Yes.
mean, and one thing that I love about that is because, they frequently don't get to taste the stuff that's on their shelves. And so they love when they get these little samples from me, okay, and from Eric and me, that I give them to them so that then they can sample them themselves and they taste them and all that stuff. So your stuff has been delivered to Lakeview
Well,
Binnies.
thank you.
Okay, and I'm sure they will enjoy them because I'm enjoying these very, very much. This stuff
Thank
is
you.
delicious. I mean, this is really, really good stuff. And again, if it weren't for Monique, I wouldn't have known about your stuff.
Yeah, no,
You
I mean,
know?
honestly, yeah, Monique has been such a champion of the brand. The reason why I'm the representative of the lakes in the US is mainly because of the relationship with Binny's. They wanted to hire somebody in Chicago to represent the lakes because we have such a great relationship with Binny's, obviously through Monique and Brett's relationship together. Yeah, so thank you. I mean, Binny's is the key to our success right
Yeah.
now. And I don't want to, obviously, well, if anybody can introduce me to Gene at Warehouse because he doesn't answer emails,
There are
I
people
would love to
here.
talk to him. But
There are people here who could introduce you to Gene. I'm not going to put them on the spot,
that's fine.
okay?
Don't worry
But
about
those
it.
of you who could introduce Marcus to Gene, if you were to send an email to Eric or me, we will help make that connection.
Thank you. I would
Okay,
love that.
but I'm
Yes.
not putting anybody on the spot because I don't want to get punched through the internet.
Totally understand that.
Okay,
Of
all
course.
right. No, that's fine. And you're going to try to be at Binny's on Wednesday night for the craft whiskey,
Yeah,
for the
yeah,
craft
definitely.
spirits.
I would
Okay.
love to try it. Yeah.
All right. So anybody who wants to, meet Marcus in person, he's going to try to be at Binny's on Wednesday night. Okay. And before we adjourn here to the after session, to the after party, I want to mention one other thing about Wednesday night. Those of you who are regulars at Delilah's, you might have seen my Facebook post that Rick Fiore, who is one of the bartenders at Delilah's, the one with the fabulous beard, he is turning 50. And Wednesday night is his 50th birthday party, and it's going to be at Delilah's. And the Craft Whiskey Festival at Binny's goes from like 5 to 8. But Rick's thing goes from 4 to 9. So that means that you could pre-game, you could after game, do whatever the heck you want. I haven't decided what I'm doing yet, but I love Rick. He's a great guy and he's a great bartender. So I'm definitely going to be doing both, but I haven't decided which. But everybody, please consider that. Before we adjourn, I just want Marcus, I want to know, do you have any last words for us about, the whiskeys, anything that we haven't addressed that you want us to know?
Yeah, if you all, I'm sure you're whiskey tourists in the sense you like to visit distilleries of the world. If you're in Scotland and you want to take a trip 40 miles south of the Scottish border into the very northwest corner of England in the area known as the Lake District, that's where you'll find us. Again, email Gil or Eric. Let me know. I would love to hook people up with tours of the distillery. You can visit, and Gil, we talked about this before we recorded, you can visit the lovely town of Cockermouth, which is where we're based out of.
Okay. Could you repeat that again? I want to make sure everybody
Sure.
heard
Yes.
that.
It
Okay.
is.
What is the name of that town again?
It's spelled exactly as it sounds, Cockermouth. One word, Cockermouth. I saw there is no lodging at the distillery. However, there's some really beautiful traditional English bed and breakfasts around the area. It's a gorgeous place. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It is the largest national park in England. It's where the English will domestically go to holiday in their caravans. It's got they call them mountains. They're really hills. We don't need to tell them that they're not mountains. They're hills. Really beautiful, rugged hills and deep lakes and cold waters, the inspiration of many English romantic poets. So I would just leave you with that. Like, but we want people to visit the lakes. It's such an important part of our brand is the Lake District.
Okay. By the way, Eric will also be providing you with the text of the comments, and you might have to you might have to like block some of it out before you send it to your supervisors if you're so inclined to do so, because there were some comments that started happening about the name Cockermouth. So
yeah, okay, yeah, sure. No,
anyway, what I'd like everybody to do right now, if you are so inclined, is to pour yourself a last dram if you have the ability to do so. I am going to finish my number 6. And then after that, I might end up going to the rest of my Revea because I have some Revea left over from a bottle. I would like everybody to please unmute. Everybody, please unmute. And please join me in saying thank you and cheers to our special guest, Marcus from the Lakes. Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you, Marcus from the Lakes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nicely done.
Marcus, this was awesome. We had a wonderful time tonight. We appreciate that you joined us here. And I'm going to ask everybody now to stay on. And Eric, please turn off the recording.